Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast. This is the space where business, mindset, and transformation intersect in raw and revealing conversations. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today in this episode, we are going to dive into something far deeper than strategy or systems. Now, let me ask you, what if love, real love, wasn't just a feeling, but a path to self mastery and conscious leadership? Our guest today, Christian de la Huerta, knows this terrain well. Born in Cuba, arriving in the US without speaking a word of English, and once consumed by self doubt, Christian is now an internationally acclaimed transformational coach. He's a TEDx speaker and also award winning author of the book Conscious Love and Awakening the Soul of Power. And with three decades of experience, his work bridges personal empowerment, spirituality, and also modern leadership. And in today's conversation, we'll be exploring the top 10 relationship challenges, the power of breath in business and love, and what it takes to transform from fear and self rejection to purpose driven clarity. So, this is more than about love, listeners. This is the hero's journey. So, with that, Kristen, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Sana. What a beautiful, complete introduction to our conversation. Thank you. So happy to be here with you.
Thank you for your kind words, Kristen. Okay, let's talk about conscious love. Let's you describe this as more than just romance. What does it actually mean to love consciously? And since we are on a business podcast, so how does that apply in business and leadership?
Well, I mean, love impacts every area of our life. If we're having trouble at home in a personal, intimate, romantic relationship, it's going to have an impact on how present we are, how we are able to do our work. And as you said in the introduction, we there's a lot of confusion about that word love, and you said it, like, we confuse word with a feeling. We can
Yeah.
and love is much more than just a feeling, because think about disciplining a child, or even disciplining an employee, right? Sometimes it doesn't feel good to have to tell them, that they're not doing as well as they can be, but we're doing it as an act of love. It's for their sake. Like, if a kid is running into a busy street, like, you yank them, and sometimes you can even use forceful language, but it's an act of love because we're doing it for their sake, for their
Right.
protection. But love is more than an act. And Scott Peck defines love as when we place ourselves outside of our comfort zone for the sake of the growth of another human being. And that definitely applies in the business place, as well.
No, that is I understand that. And I've often found that the way we lead mirrors the way we love, and our triggers in personal relationships, they tend to surface in teams too. So how do we begin to bring more awareness to that, Kristen?
It's like with everything else, I think, to me, the first step is awareness, becoming conscious, mindful of why we do the things we do. And so much of the time, we're not even aware of what we're saying and what we're thinking. We don't question our beliefs, which a lot of time is just conditioning that has been passed on, from generation to generation, and most of the time, we haven't even stopped to question it. So,
Mhm.
a lot of it, to me, the first step is becoming aware. Like, why do we do the things we do? Why do we believe certain things? What are our beliefs about leadership, and leadership styles? And how can we show up in a different way? Um, and it also relates to power dynamics. So rather than, especially in the workplace, approaching it from a hierarchical, my way or the highway, and the way that I feel valuable and worthy and powerful is by having people below me or by putting, by pushing somebody down in order for me to feel powerful. It's like, to me, that's not a really good strategy in life or in
Mm.
work. And so, as pertains to power dynamics, uh, there are ways that we can feel powerful in a non-hierarchical way, that we don't need to push anybody down in order for us to feel powerful.
Definitely, definitely. There is definitely a way out. Interesting. Which challenge surprises people most? And why do you think it is so persistent across industries and cultures?
Well, again, because the reason it's so persistent is because that differentiation or that separation between the personal and how we feel inside and how we feel about ourselves and how we express love, we can't just leave that at home. Of course, that's going to influence how we relate to other humans at
Mhm.
work. So one of the challenges to relationships is that we drag our past into the present, right? So we carry old
Yeah.
wounds from the past, a lot of which we're not even conscious of. We allow those to get in the way of our relationships, and that would be both at home and in the workplace. So, for example, if we were, let's just get a couple examples. If our parents got divorced and our father left, then we have difficulties relating to men or trusting men, or if one of our past partners cheated on us, then develop a difficulty trusting other humans. And it's not just in the area of love, that an inability to trust or difficulty trusting impacts all of our relationships. And the tragic part of that is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we're approaching any relationship, personal or professional, with that inability to trust or with that hesitancy, of course, people are gonna feel that and respond to that. And one of the other main obstacles to love in the personal relationship arena is that we don't understand what the ego mind is. And that also applies in the workplace. So that's the reason because we didn't understand how the ego mind works and its defensiveness and in desire to control everyone and everything, and its judgmental nature. So that's the reason why we get stuck into power struggles, both at home and at work. And I think another one that applies both at home and in the workplace is that we settle for less because we don't value ourselves completely. We settle, right? We accept relationships and jobs that aren't really a match for who we are, that don't really nourish us at a soul level. And so, of course, that's a problem both in the personal and professional arenas. Okay.
During the editing. But as you mentioned about the second point, that sometimes we succumb to uh, being kind of the inferior one or the one who is more receptive rather than having a kind of equal share um, uh, in partnership or relationship or in the workplace. It's because that we don't value ourselves. So why do you think, what exactly are the reasons behind that?
The reasons we don't value ourselves, well,
Yeah.
it's mostly conditioning. It's stuff that because as kids, we don't come in with that. We don't come in with psychological and emotional hangups and self-doubt. Um, when we're kids, we just ourselves, and we're expressing that fully. Um, and yet at some point, whether it's our parents in a moment of overwhelm, or a teacher that didn't know how to do things any better, or people who hadn't worked through their own self-doubt and psychological, um, unhealthy expressions, they tell us something the wrong way. And
Mhm.
they'll say things where they'll go, "You're not good enough," or "You're too much of this, you're not enough of that, you're not smart enough," or "How dumb is that?" Things that they didn't mean to say with a bad intention for the most part, but those little minds that don't know any better just take it on as truth. right? And so we begin to develop these beliefs that have no basis on reality. That we're not good enough, that we're not smart
Mhm.
enough, that we're not beautiful enough, that we're too much of this, not enough of that. And then that stuff continues to grow inside of us, and when we're again, like, we're approaching relationships with that stuff going on, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we start subconsciously creating situations in our lives that are gonna feed further evidence to those lies, to those misunderstandings. And so then things get worse and worse and worse, and the most tragic part about it is that none of it is true.
Mm, mm. That can be really, really daunting. And Kristen, you have helped people transform from self-sabotage and shame into self-confidence and empowerment. Um, what inner shift usually sparks that kind of breakthrough? Is it like instant or does it take a lot of time?
It depends, on what those issues were to begin with. And the reason that I'm good at what I do is because it happened in my case. I can't tell you, Sana, how much self-doubt, how little self-worth I had as a teenager. My adolescence was one long depression. Um, and flash to today, and no matter what happens in my life, no matter the circumstances, the details, whether a relationship works out or it doesn't, whether a project succeeds or quote unquote it fails, I never ever ever question my sense of worth. It's like I know who I am, and that is unshakable. And so I know that if that can happen in me, it can happen with anyone else. And how do we do that? Again, the process begins with self-awareness, and that includes, why do I feel this way? And then understanding the patterns. Like, is there certain people that tend to trigger those moments of self-doubt? Or is there certain situations that trigger my reactivity? And if I react to somebody, what's really going on, right? Whether it's what's going on underneath the surface. Because we're not reacting to the surface situation. We're reacting because some button inside of us got triggered, and it triggered some core identity issue. Even if it isn't true, that's what's triggered. So, for example, say you and I have a lunch with uh, Mary, and I have lunch with her on
Mhm.
Mondays. You have lunch with her on Tuesday, and Mary is inevitably late. So there I am on Mondays, like, oh my god, there I knew she was going to be late. I should have told her that I was gonna be here, 20 minutes earlier so that she would
Mm.
get here on time, and she's so disrespectful, she's so selfish, she doesn't care about anybody's time but her own, and then Mary gets there, and because we're so conditioned not to be authentic, we put on a fake smile, and then we keep having our lunch, and then, the sarcasm maybe starts dripping out the side of our mouth. Um, whereas
Yeah.
you, for example, might say, "Oh, great, she's late. Great, I have extra 20 minutes. Let me return that phone call. Let me check my email. Let me catch up on the news." There's so many different ways to respond to anybody's lateness. Why do I take it so personally? Why does it get me so much? And so if we were gonna do that kinda work, it would look something like, "All right, well, it's not really when Mary's late that it gets me, it's when anybody's late, and if I get honest and zoom out a little bit more, it's when somebody cuts me off in traffic. I also feel disrespected, unseen, and so that becomes the deeper issue, right? Is that I feel disrespected, I feel unseen, and those feelings are way older than my lunch with Mary. So once we are able to do the work and identify the patterns, then we can do something about it, right? Whether we go to therapy or go to a spiritual coach, or whether we do breath work, and we can heal that original misunderstanding that said that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, which is that's what's getting triggered by this more surfacey situations in our lives and in our relationships.
Mm. I think this particular situation or scenario, it pretty much makes it clear. Where does exactly that difference lie, Kristen? That's a really good one.
Mm.
Really good one. Oh, okay. Talking about your journey as well. From I mean, you did share snippets of that, and thank you for that. And also from being terrified of public speaking to now becoming a TEDx speaker and then best-selling author. That's a huge, huge leap. But for the fact that it must have had so many years of working on yourself, coming out of your comfort zone, um, so many moments of self realization and improving yourself. It definitely needs a lot of inner work and humility as well. What helped you transcend that fear? And what advice do you have for others who are unintentionally, unfortunately, hiding their voice?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And because that's what it is that we're doing, we're suppressing ourselves, our innate gifts, our contributions, our value. And I knew, I always had a sense of mission. I always knew that I was here to make a difference, and yet, because I was so terrified to speak in public or even in a meeting, not just like standing in front of a group, forget it. It's no way I was gonna do that. But even in a meeting, I would often not speak up or not share because of that self-doubt and because of that fear of speaking in public. And so that I realized if I'm really gonna fulfill my mission, I have to get over this. And so I signed up for a public speaking course, which I hated. For 14
Oh,
weeks, I'd had to get up on Thursday nights 3 times and give a 2-minute speech. And come Monday, in the beginning, I was already, like, dreading Thursday night. I was already, like, starting to worry and lose sleep about it. But what happened? Like, probably halfway through the course, just by virtue of doing it and doing it and doing it again, it stopped being such a big deal. And so this applies to how do you move through fear no matter what it's about, right? And there's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And here it is in 30 seconds. Her model is imagine concentric circles. So the inner circle, and you mentioned the word, is our original comfort zone. This is where we feel comfortable now, being in the world, speaking, expressing ourselves, every time we take a little step outside of that comfort zone, right? So each one of those
yeah.
2-minute speeches was me pushing out and stepping out that comfort zone. And every time we take a little step and we go a little further and we go a little further, imagine if we did that once a week. Like if we make that commitment, or I'm going to do something this week that's going to push me out of my comfort zone, do something that's going to place myself a little bit at risk, whether this is in relationships, and say I'm going to say yes and go on that coffee date that I've been avoiding doing, or whether it's, yeah, I'm gonna take on that project at work that I'm a little afraid of, or I'm gonna force myself this week to raise my hand and say what I'm thinking at a meeting. But if we do that once a week, imagine 52 weeks later, our comfort zone is gonna be way out there. We're gonna be so much more at ease with who we are and how we contribute to the world.
Yes, brilliantly explained, Christian, and specifically with your journey as an example. Yeah, I and I think the fear of change, it's natural. Our brains are designed in such a way that it will always protect us from any kind of change. But then, um the question here is so important, that is it like your brain is controlling you, as in your mind is controlling you, or you are controlling your mind?
Yes,
So
exactly. And
it's
and and you're absolutely right, and that's the source of all fear, and it's that ego mind, right? And it's
Mm.
we don't have time to get into the conversation about what the ego mind is because there's a lot to say about that. But here's a quick metaphor, quick visual. If you put a football in the center of a stadium, that's the ego mind. The ego mind is that sense of self, the sense of separate personality. This is Christian, that is Sarah over there. Um, who we are
Mm.
is actually the stadium. And we've allowed this tiny, tiny, tiny part of who we are to think that it is all who we are and to make really important choices about our lives, about our work, about our relationships from its very small and limited and always fear-based perspective. So part of the process of freeing ourselves is realizing we are not that little baseball or that little football. We are the stadium, and so then that goes back to that process of understanding why we do the things we do and understanding the mind. And in my previous book, Awakening the Soul of Power, I spend a lot of time um, understanding what the ego
Mm,
mind is and why it sabotages, why we sabotage ourselves.
absolutely. Great, great. Kristen, if our listeners, before we wrap up, if they would like to get a hold of your book, Conscious Love, and also they would like to connect with you, what will be the best way?
The best way to reach me is probably my website. So soulfulpower.com. 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 The book is available on Amazon, so I don't know wherever your listeners are, whether they have access to Amazon. I imagine they do. It can also be ordered, through different distributors to have it delivered to a local bookstore.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Kristen, thank you. Thank you for bringing your depth, your story, and also your soul to this conversation. And I absolutely would recommend all of our listeners to check out your book, Conscious Love. It's more than a relationship guide, it is a map to becoming who you are meant to be. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. How beautifully expressed. Thank you so much, Sana, for having me on the show and for having the show because I know that in your willingness to have the show, many people both in their personal and professional lives are receiving a lot of wisdom and value and good information. So thank you for helping us all.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, Kristen. And to all the listeners, if you are listening and feel called to move from self doubt into self trust, from unconscious habits to conscious love, Christian's work is a powerful place to begin with. And just refer to the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, on BizBlend, keep blending the bold with the mindful. And also, I would like to reiterate that real power begins within. With that, this is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.